You're listening to the Fairfax Bible Church Discipleship Podcast, where we aim to help our church think biblically and grow as disciples who love Christ and live sent for His glory. For more information about our church, visit www.fairfaxbible.org or follow us on social media. Well, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Fairfax Bible Church Discipleship Podcast. My name is Ryan Shaughnessy, and I am here with somebody that you've probably seen on Sunday mornings, our Director of Worship and Arts, Mr. Abe Gibson. How's it going, Abe?
It's great, man. Great to be here.
Abe, are you fully recovered from Thanksgiving yet?
No, not at all.
Not
Not at
even,
all.
Not even close, huh?
Not even close. How about you?
I think so. We didn't have too many leftovers, so I got through my leftover pumpkin pie, and I'm good to go. Looking forward to Christmas Eve dinner now, so I'll get some time to prepare.
Yeah, what do you do for that?
Usually we do a roast, so I don't know what our plans are, but I think I'll be handling that this year.
Nice.
We'll see how it goes.
Nice.
We'll catch up after that, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, Abe, today you and I get to talk about something that I'm sure no one has any opinions about, and that is social media. So I know when we think social media, obviously that's an extremely broad topic that we're eventually going to zoom in a little bit on, but we want to try to focus mainly on how we engage people in social media. So we're going to be kind of thinking about this almost like Google Maps, where, you start out, you get that big picture, and then eventually you're going to drill down, putting that little yellow man on the street and moving him around. Does that sound good?
Perfect.
All right. Well, first, I want to know from you, I've gotten a little glimpse, just being, Abe and I are friends in real life too. We're also friends in this virtual world of Facebook, but I want to know from you what your social media habits look like. What are some of the platforms that you use? How often do you use them? What do you really use them for?
Yeah. So when I was preparing for this, I looked at the screen time
Oh, that's
feature.
dangerous.
Yeah, it was kind of scary, and I looked at Facebook because I really only have Facebook left, and I was averaging about 45 minutes a day on the app. So I primarily use just Facebook, and most of it is for this one group called Dunder Mifflin Theological Seminary. And that's where I spend most of my time.
I thought about bringing out my phone to check the screen time thing, but I'm not doing that today. I'm going to save everybody. I think for the most part, I just use Instagram and end up sharing pictures on Facebook. But even simple things like that, I've realized can somehow eat away at your time, which I'm really nervous to look at my screen time thing now and compare that. But I've gone and made a rule for myself that on Instagram I won't follow more than 100 people, and that's kind of cut down on just the mindless scrolling that I can go through. But I'm going to let the cat out of the bag here for all of you guys, and say I also handle all of the social media for the church. So any complaints that you guys have, after you direct them to Abe, they're probably going to come to me. But a good chunk of my time can also go into planning and interacting on those things. So if you guys follow us on social media and somebody's talking to you and you're like, I have no idea who this is, it's probably me. So you're welcome. But anyway, I know I've always told myself that if I wasn't running those pages, that I probably wouldn't be on social media. We all know that's probably a lie too. But so speaking of which, do you think that we should even be involved on social media as Christians, or is it better to just remove it from our lives completely, or like worthwhile taking breaks from every once in a while? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that social media is important, and there's a lot of good that has come from it and good that can come from it. I think individually it's probably a little bit more nuanced. If you, let's say you struggle with pride, then maybe being super active on social media and posting things about yourself and could be dangerous. So I think that it's something that you just have to be cautious about and be intentional. But yeah, I think it's something that we could all use for the glory of God.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about how we use it. But I think especially for you and I in leadership positions in the church, and really for all of us as we live sent in our communities, the majority of people in our church and the majority of people in the communities we serve and minister to are on some sort of social media, whether that's Facebook. I mean, you got like neighborhood Facebook groups, Instagram, all the TikTok for the younger crowd, which Abe, you might fall into that. I don't know if you got to look into TikTok, man.
Not yet, over my dead body.
Well, I think personally we would lose out on a huge opportunity to engage with those people on a more regular basis if we weren't involved in social media.
Mhm.
And I hate to say it, but especially during 2020, like social media is for a lot of people really like their only source of engagement for a lot of
Mhm.
people, which is kind of sad to think about. But I've never taken like any personal breaks from social media, like those high school relationships where you take a break, but you know you're still dating and you're just gonna run back to it. But I could see the value in it, even as we look at like the patterns of how Jesus would engage with people and then withdraw. So engage intentionally and then withdraw intentionally. But what are some of the other benefits that you see with using social media? You mentioned we can use social media to the glory of God, but what are some of the benefits of using social media?
Yeah, when thinking about this question, I think that there's an aspect of being connected to just various different people, and it's global. So for people that want to use it to really share the gospel and proclaim the gospel, there's never before in history have we had the reach that we have. So there's people in Africa that are listening to sermons or watching videos of sermons from people in the United States, and before you'd have to get on a boat and travel for 6 months to get to Africa just to preach the gospel to them. So there's I mean just the benefit of making the world even smaller than it
Mhm.
is something that I think we probably take for granted, or we don't really think about too often.
Yeah, you mentioned like the connection between people like that and how easy that is, but how would you say your online relationships differ from in-person relationships? Do they differ at all? Should they differ at all?
I think that they do. I think that they probably shouldn't. I know that if I were online, I would be a lot more bold if I was communicating with if I was in a disagreement with somebody and I was, that person happened to be an NFL defensive tackle. I would definitely interact with him a lot different than if he was standing face to face. So I think that it lends itself being behind a keyboard to I think I'm tempted to be less charitable and less respectful, where when you're dealing with somebody in person there's just something about that interaction that you often give them more respect and grace in person.
So with that, do you think there's any topics that we should avoid on social media that you may talk about in person, but anything we should avoid on social media?
Yeah, I think that really what you want to look at social media is just an extension of everything else in life. So
Hmm.
how am I going to use this to exalt Christ? How am I going to um, really proclaim the gospel? And it doesn't mean that you're just constantly maybe sharing quotes or sermons or Bible verses. It doesn't have to be that, but like how does your social media presence proclaim Christ in how you post? And I really think about Zinzendorf, a German reformer. He had a famous quote, and he said, "My goal in life is to preach the gospel, die, and be forgotten." And I really think that if we approach social media as whatever I'm going to post, being intentional about it, I want it to be about Christ, and I want people to see Christ in it. And I don't want people to look at me, and I don't want to exalt myself. And I think it's difficult to do that on social media, because ultimately you're probably going to look kind of like a crazy lunatic at sometimes. But I mean, it's the Christian walk really isn't about looking cool. So um, I think practically just being intentional and giving God the glory in all of your posts and stuff like that.
We're going to dig into that a little more. And I think at this point, I want to begin zooming in a bit. We're looking at the map, zooming in a bit on our map. And this would be the place, honestly, in the podcast where we could just simply insert Pastor Jeff's sermon from Sunday. I don't know if any of you guys listened to it, but we could insert that here, call it a day. So I admit I may be hijacking some of his stuff out here. He may actually run out from his office and jump in if I'm saying anything incorrectly. But I want to talk about some of the potential danger zones when using social media. So you've hinted at some of them already, but what would you say are some of those things that we need to watch out for when, particularly when engaging with people on social media?
Hmm. Yeah, just being being charitable and gracious with people is the biggest thing. And as like you mentioned, like topics, I think one that's proved itself to be pretty unfruitful is political rhetoric. So I think that's one that you probably want to avoid as much as possible, just because just discourse online, it just doesn't seem to lend itself well to people that differ in opinions, and it doesn't seem like many people are persuaded either way. So it seems like it's kind of a dead end type of thing to post about, and it can really isolate yourself. So you can really isolate yourself, and in things that are really divisive in that nature. Um, the enemy, like the people that are unbelievers, instead of the mission field, they end up becoming like the enemy. So
Mhm.
I think we have to be very cautious and steward those conversations very well.
Yeah, for me, there's two verses that come to mind when I'm thinking about some danger zones, especially in my life. One is Ephesians 4:29, which says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as it fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." And the other is Proverbs 18:21, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue."
Mm.
And so for me, the danger zone I need to watch out for when engaging with people on social media, especially, is it's not the overtly loud and brash posts. Like, you're probably not going to see me going off on political posts like that.
Hmm.
But for me, it's my sarcasm that gets me in trouble. And so looking at Ephesians 4, it may not be seen by others as corrupting talk coming out of my mouth, but is it building up my friends and family, or are my words online, are they bringing life to relationships or
Mm.
death? So that's kind of the danger zone for me. And the other thing I've seen online, especially this year, like you were talking about, with a lot of controversial topics being thrown around, is that you often don't have the entire context of somebody's relationship,
Hmm.
just by looking at that online. So Abe, you and I we could take a topic like race or a pandemic or politics, for example, because let's be real, those are probably the most divisive topics that we see, especially this year. Um, but you and I could have had hour-long conversations in the office here or
Hmm.
at our houses about these specific topics, and then people online will only see this little two-sentence rebuttal that you post and make a judgment, right or wrong, based off of that. So
Yeah.
those are kind of the danger zones that I think about. But any other danger zones you think we need to watch out for?
Well, I really like your point just about even the more subtle things. I think we really have to have a very serious view of our sin, and really examine our hearts, and ask God to search our hearts, because different sins can really be um, really show themselves, and others are a little bit more behind the scenes. And on social media, even just like um, showing off maybe something that you have, or a trip that you've taken, or really just like little bits of pride that they might just seem super harmless, but we really have to pray and ask God to show us like where we're where our desires are, and where we can really do better as believers, and grow more like Christ. And I think just avoiding um, really just in general, avoiding anything that exalts yourself is probably the biggest and easiest thing to take away from just topics to avoid in general.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing. It's really four more things, but bear with me. It'll go quick. On Sunday, Pastor Jeff talked about 4 ways that we can fail in evangelism, and the whole time he was talking about it, I couldn't help but think that these are 4 ways that we can really fail in social media as well. So
Hmm.
if you didn't listen to the sermon from Sunday, this past Sunday, which was November 29th, I believe, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that. But I'll give you those 4 things real quick, and we can think about it in the context of social media as I'm talking about those. But number one, the number one way we can fail is we just try to win an argument,
Hmm.
which I know you said differing opinions rarely ends well on social media. Now, number two way we can fail, we get mad when they push back or question our beliefs. Number three, when we're harsh or judgmental. And then number four, when we get snarky and sarcastic. And thank you for hitting me right in the heart with with that, Pastor Jeff. But he mentioned like the use of memes on social media. That's a
Hmm.
huge thing, obviously, but laced in that is like that sarcasm and that snark where we're trying to be funny or clever, but it's not helping to accomplish the mission of Jesus. So, on a similar note with the danger zone, there's another thing I've seen play out on social media. Specifically as it relates to how truth is communicated. So
Hmm.
we see in 1 Peter 3:15 it says, "But in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you." yet do it with gentleness and respect. And so the question I have for you, Abe, is how do we balance then that inherently offensive truth of the gospel that we see in Matthew 10:34 with gentleness and respect, especially in an online environment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I have the answer for that. It's that's it's a difficult question, and it's very difficult in practice because the gospel is offensive in nature, and um, really, when you share the gospel, you're essentially telling somebody that the way that they're living is contrary to what God, you know, requires,
Mm-hmm.
and that's offensive, and it should be. So handling that with grace and understanding that I am a sinner. I am um, deserve nothing that God has given me, and anything that I have that I could boast about is because of Christ and His finished work on the cross. So um, online as well as in person, just being extremely gracious with people. I think that when you're talking to other believers, there's a little bit more flexibility with being gracious, and and like with Paul when he was talking to the Galatians and Corinthians, like there's a little bit more firmness, but especially with unbelievers, there shouldn't be an expectation really of anything from them. So we have to be extremely gracious in our interactions.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of like humility coming from that too, and
Mm-hmm.
having that attitude of humility in those interactions. So, um, and the thing that I think about is even if we have the truth, what we're saying is true, we can still sin in our delivery of that truth, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is kind of what you're hinting at as well. And if we just circle back to those four ways that we can fail on social media, like that's a big part of how we can sin, even though we're conveying the truth. And we hit
Mm-hmm.
this last week with anger. Actually, Matt and I were talking about that, but I think it applies here as well, where James 1:19 says to be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. And I think that would definitely help us kind of balance speaking the truth with gentleness and respect.
Yeah.
Well, hey, before we wrap this up, I wanted to share 6 questions that you can ask yourself before hitting post or reply on social media, and I'll give you a chance to add any thoughts after that. But here are the 6 questions that I found that are pretty helpful to ask myself internally before hitting post. So, number one is what I'm talking or is what I'm about to post just bringing attention to myself, or does it benefit anyone else? And you mentioned this already too, like is it something that I've obtained? Is it a trip that we go on that's just trying to bring attention to myself? Like there's been a few times where I've had to go back like right after posting something that I'm like, this is really just drawing attention to myself,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't need to be out there. So that was the first question. The second question is this based on opinion or on the truth of Scripture? And now opinions aren't always a bad thing unless they're contrary to Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
So, keeping that in mind. Number three, are you looking at it to measure your worth or see how you're doing? And just an encouragement that your worth is not going to be measured by the number of artificial likes that you get on a post. And then number four, is this the right time and place for this conversation? So I think we've also been talking about that a little bit too. Like something I've learned is that um, no matter how bad we want it to be, social media is not a living room. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
two people sitting on a couch right here. It's more like 1,000+ seat auditorium where,
Yeah.
in some cases, where you have an audience of people viewing things from the crowd and not really participating in that conversation. So, oftentimes it may be one of those beneficial conversations to have on a couch, one on one, instead of for
It's great.
the
Yeah.
audience of people to see. Number five, how important is this issue? So is this like a tier one, tier two, tier three issue? Kind of asking your question, is the juice worth the squeeze on this
Mm-hmm.
one, especially in
Yeah.
a social media world? And then finally, the last question I like to ask myself is, am I putting the argument above the person? And I
Mm.
think especially within the church, thinking about this, like you can win the argument, but still lose the friend in the process, and that can be pretty
Mm.
dangerous.
Yeah.
And in that case, you've lost anyway. So
Yeah.
um, it's just not worth it in that case. So, are there any other questions that you find yourself asking before posting, hitting post or reply?
Yeah, I mean, I think just in being transparent, like I really struggle with pride, and my social media um from a couple years ago really reflected that, and um really used it to boast of myself, and I think this is great stuff to be able to ask yourself, what why am I posting this, and then also just like the seriousness of my sin, um and just looking at how I'm interacting online, and is that really just a response to of sin, and really just treating it very seriously, and because I think it's very easy to be flippant online because it's so easy to interact,
Hmm.
and it's so easy just to hit a button to post something, but being very intentional, and these questions are great, and I'm gonna print them out, and keep them close.
For the one day a week that you post on
Yeah, the one day
Facebook.
a week. Yeah.
If you guys need some Puritan quotes, make sure you send a friend request to Abe on Facebook, and
Yes.
he'll give you your daily quota of Puritan quotes. But
Yes.
I know these may be a lot of things to think about before posting, but I've really seen the benefit of asking these questions. And it may not be like every time you're asking these questions, but getting in the habit of being mindful about what you're posting is more the key there, and
Hmm.
and knowing like there's a reason for posting this. What is that motivation? What's really driving me to post this thing? And asking like, is it biblical? Is it worthwhile posting? Is it going to build up our brothers and sisters or not? I hope this information was beneficial for you. But real quick, Abe, you got any last thoughts on how to engage with people on social media?
I mean, just really, it's the love Christ lives sent, and I think how we live sent is by um, knowing Christ, making Him known, and teaching others to do the same. So if we approach social media with that lens, the Lord can really use it.
I love it, man. Well, thanks. I would be a fool to pass up this opportunity right now. So I've got to end this episode by encouraging all of you to go take a second and go follow us on Instagram at Fairfax Bible. You can like our page on Facebook. You can subscribe on YouTube as well. If you search for Fairfax Bible Church, you'll be able to watch this if you're not already watching it on YouTube and see our lovely faces. Abe will be working on getting his TikTok soon as well. So you'll be able to find him on there.
Oh man.
But thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope this was helpful, like I said, and we'll see you on Sunday, I guess. Thanks, Abe. Thanks for hanging
Yeah.
out, man.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to the Fairfax Bible Church Discipleship Podcast. If this episode was helpful for you, feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone else. Until next time, we pray you continue to grow as a disciple as you love Christ and live sent.